The Texas sun blazed mercilessly as Jake filled the water troughs in the enclosures of Blackwood Sanctuary. At 25, his calloused hands told the story of someone who had dedicated his life to animals, even when life hadn't been generous to him. For 3 years he had worked in this peculiar place, a private sanctuary where businessmen and collectors kept exotic species for behavioral observation and private entertainment. "Jake! Come here, boy." The rough voice of Hank, the supervisor, echoed among the mesquite trees. The grey-haired man with strong arms gestured impatiently near the main gate. Dropping the bucket, Jake ran to where Hank was waiting beside a truck covered by a worn tarp. The engine was still rumbling, expelling dark smoke that mixed with the dry afternoon air. "Another one has arrived," said Hank, pointing to the truck. "Direct order from Mr. Victor. It's a horse, but not just any horse." Jake frowned. Horses weren't common at the sanctuary, which specialized in big cats and exotic birds. "A horse? For which enclosure?" "For the jaguar section." Hank lowered his voice, as if the words carried too much weight. "The boss has special plans for this animal." 2 employees got down from the truck, serious faces and hurried movements. They opened the back and carefully removed a horse that made Jake's heart race. The animal was magnificent, even in its weakened state. Dark coat marked by scars that told silent stories, muscles that still revealed the nobility of a special lineage. "My God," murmured Jake, approaching slowly. "What a beautiful animal." The horse raised its head and its eyes met Jake's. There was no desperation in that gaze, no fear. There was something that Jake recognized immediately: dignity, a dignity that resisted the circumstances. "Don't get attached," warned Hank, noticing the young man's expression. "This one didn't come to live like the others. It has a certain destination." "What destination?" "Ask the boss when he arrives tomorrow. For now, take him to the preparatory enclosure. Water and hay, nothing more." Jake took the rope that one of the employees handed him. The horse followed without resistance, walking with the slowness of one who carries not only the weight of the body, but the weight of a story. As they walked along the dirt path, Jake noticed a nearly faded mark on the animal's flank, a crest that seemed familiar to him. "How did you end up here, buddy?" he whispered to the horse, which moved its ears as if understanding the question. The preparatory enclosure was a few meters from the jaguar section. It was a space surrounded by high fences, with a small covered area and an automatic water trough. Jake opened the gate and released the horse, which immediately headed for the water. "Drink slowly, friend," he said softly. "Oh, you're home now." But even as he spoke those words, Jake felt he was lying. That place wasn't home for anyone, much less for an animal as noble as that horse. Blackwood Sanctuary had its own rules, and Victor Blackwood wasn't known for his compassion. At dusk, when the last rays of sunlight painted the grassland golden, Jake returned to the preparatory enclosure. The horse was lying in the shade but raised its head when it saw him approach. "I brought something for you," said Jake, showing an apple he had taken from the canteen. "It's not much, but—" The horse got up slowly and approached the fence. It took the apple delicately, chewed slowly, unhurried. Its eyes didn't leave Jake's for a moment. "You were important once, weren't you?" asked Jake, extending his hand to touch the animal's muzzle. "Those scars, you have a story to tell." From the jaguar section, a few meters away, came a low roar. The horse turned its ears in the direction of the sound but showed no fear. Jake, however, felt a shiver run down his spine. "The boss arrives tomorrow," he said, more to himself than to the horse, "and then we'll find out what he wants with you." Night fell quickly, as it happens in the grasslands. Jake should have left long ago, but something kept him there. He sat on the ground outside the fence and watched the horse. The animal seemed comfortable with his presence, grazing peacefully on the hay that had been provided. "You know something?" said Jake, breaking the silence of the night. "There's something about you that reminds me of myself. That calmness, that acceptance. As if you know that sometimes we don't have a choice, but we can still choose how to face things." The horse stopped eating and approached the fence again. It lowered its head, allowing Jake to touch its forehead. In that moment, a silent connection was established between man and animal. It was as if both recognized in each other the same wound, that of someone who once had a place in the world and lost it, but never lost hope of finding it again. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue. Morning arrived with the sound of powerful engines cutting through the silence of the grasslands. Jake, who had spent the night restless thinking about the horse, immediately recognized the sound of Victor Blackwood's cars. They were always imposing, dark vehicles that raised dust and left trails of intimidation wherever they passed. Victor got out of an armored pickup truck, accompanied by two men in suits, incongruous in that wild landscape. At 52, the businessman maintained the erect posture of someone who never needed to ask anyone for anything. His grey hair was always perfectly combed, and his small penetrating eyes seemed to calculate the value of everything around him. "Hank!" he shouted without bothering to greet the employees who were approaching curiously. "I want to see the animal. Now." Jake felt his stomach tighten. He was feeding the macaws when he saw the group heading to the preparatory enclosure. He dropped everything and followed them at a distance, trying to appear busy with other tasks. "It's this one," said Hank, pointing to the horse that was grazing peacefully. "It arrived yesterday as you requested." Victor approached the fence with eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Perfect, exactly what I needed for the experiment." "Experiment?" Jake couldn't contain the question, even knowing he shouldn't have interfered. Victor turned slowly, evaluating the young employee. "And you are?" "Jake, sir. Caretaker for the big cats and birds." "Ah, yes. Hank told me about you. The boy who has a way with animals." Victor smiled, but there was coldness in that smile. "Then you'll like what I have planned." Hank cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Mr. Victor, perhaps it would be better to explain in the office." No, let the boy hear. After all, he's going to participate in the project." Victor looked back at the horse. "I'm organizing a unique behavioral study. I'm going to observe how different species interact when placed together in a controlled environment." Jake felt a chill in his stomach. "What do you mean, sir?" "Simple. I'm going to transfer this horse to the jaguar enclosure. I want to document how they will react to the presence of a potential prey. It's for an academic project I'm funding." "But, sir," Jake stepped forward, forgetting the hierarchy. "The jaguars might what?" Victor raised an eyebrow. "Do exactly what nature programmed them to do? That's what this is about, boy. Pure science." The horse, as if sensing the danger in the conversation, approached the fence and looked directly at Jake. In that gaze there was no plea for help, there was trust. A trust that made the young man's heart tighten even more. "When will that be?" asked Hank. "Tonight I want cameras installed at all angles, and you two," he pointed to Jake and Hank, "will monitor everything. I need detailed reports." "Mr. Victor," Jake tried once more, "perhaps it would be better to do a gradual adaptation. Put the animals close but separated first." "Are you questioning my methods?" Victor's voice became dangerously low. "No, sir, it's just that this horse seems special. Maybe it would be worth more alive than..." "Than what, Jake?" Victor approached the fence and touched the horse's neck, which instinctively moved away. "This animal has already fulfilled its purpose in life. Now it will fulfill another." One of the suited men whispered something in Victor's ear, who nodded impatiently. "I have other commitments. Hank, prepare everything for 7 in the evening. And you, Jake, will make sure the horse is well fed and hydrated. We want it to be in perfect condition." The group moved away, leaving Jake alone with Hank and the horse. The supervisor nervously fiddled with his cap, avoiding the young man's gaze. "Hank, do you know the history of this horse?" "Don't ask questions, kid. You know how things work. Here. But that mark on his flank, it looks like the Blackwood family crest." Hank stopped fidgeting with his cap and looked around, making sure they were alone. "Listen carefully, Jake. There are things it's better not to know, and there are things it's better not to talk about." "He belonged to the family, didn't he?" Hank's silence was answer enough. "Why is he here then?" "Because Mr. Victor doesn't like waste. In his mind, everything has to have utility." Hank sighed deeply. This horse was once a champion. Titles, medals, very high market value. until he got injured in a competition and couldn't race anymore. And because of that, he became useless to the family business, but the boss found a way to take advantage of him anyway. Jake looked at the horse, which was watching them attentively. It was as if the animal understood every word. "Hank, we can't let this happen." "We can't do anything, Jake. You have a family to support. I have a family to support. This job is all we have." "But it's wrong." "A lot of things are wrong in this world, boy. Doesn't mean we can fix everything." Hank walked away, leaving Jake alone with the horse. The young man approached the fence and extended his hand. The animal came to him, allowing him to touch its muzzle. "You know what's going to happen, don't you?" he whispered. "And yet you're calm. How do you manage it?" The horse snorted softly as if trying to convey some message. Jake felt tears burning his eyes, but he held them back. "I'll find a way," he promised. "I don't know how, but I'll find a way." The afternoon passed too slowly and too quickly at the same time. Jake carried out his duties mechanically, but his thoughts were always turned to the horse and to the jaguars that would soon be its enclosure companions. The 3 felines, 2 adults and 1 young, were magnificent animals, but with instincts that millions of years of evolution had perfected. 7 o'clock arrived, implacable as a sentence. Jake had spent the entire day trying to find a way to prevent what was about to happen, but all of his ideas ran into the same reality. He was just an employee with no power at all against Victor Blackwood's will. The jaguar enclosure had been meticulously prepared. Cameras installed in every corner, special lighting, and an observation tower from which Victor and his guests, 3 businessmen and a man who introduced himself as a researcher, could watch everything in safety and comfort. "Jake, bring the horse," ordered Hank, his voice trembling slightly. The young caretaker approached the preparatory enclosure with shaky legs. The horse was standing, alert, as if it knew something important was about to happen. When it saw Jake, it walked to the fence and touched its muzzle to his hand. "Forgive me," whispered Jake, attaching the rope to the animal's halter. "I tried. I really tried." The horse followed him docilely along the path that led to the jaguar enclosure. Each step resonated in Jake's heart like the beat of a funeral drum. When they reached the main gate of the enclosure, the animal stopped and looked around, studying the new environment. The enclosure was spacious, about 50 square meters, with natural vegetation and a shaded area where the jaguars usually rested. The 3 felines were right there, observing the movement with attentive yellow eyes. "Everything is ready, Mr. Victor," announced Hank through the radio. From the observation tower, the metallic voice of the boss echoed, "You can put the animal in there." Jake opened the gate, his hands visibly trembling. The horse entered the enclosure with dignity, stopping in the center and looking around without showing panic. It was as if it accepted its fate with a serenity that impressed even Jake. "Now release the internal divider," came Victor's order again. Hank activated the mechanism that separated the area where the jaguars were from the main area of the enclosure. The metallic sound echoed dryly in the night air, and everyone held their breath. The first to move was Iris, the larger adult jaguar, with golden spots that shone under the artificial lights. She got up slowly, sniffed the air, and took a few cautious steps toward the horse. "It's beginning," murmured one of the guests in the observation tower. But what happened next left everyone astonished. Iris stopped 3 meters from the horse and sat down. She simply sat down like an obedient dog, observing the equine with curiosity but without any sign of aggression. "What the hell?" grumbled Victor. The second jaguar, Nora, also approached, but her reaction was even more surprising. She lay down on the ground, stretched her front paws and lowered her head, in a posture that any specialist in animal behavior would recognize as respectful submission. "This isn't right," said the researcher in the tower. "Felines don't act like this with potential prey." But it was the reaction of the third jaguar that left everyone truly perplexed. Maya, the youngest, with a characteristic scar on her muzzle, walked directly to the horse. Jake felt his heart race, certain that finally nature would follow its course. Instead, the young jaguar stopped beside the horse and simply leaned her body against the animal's flank. The horse, in turn, lowered its head and gently touched the feline's back with its muzzle. The silence that followed was deafening. "This is impossible," murmured Victor through the radio. "Hank, how long has it been since these jaguars ate?" "They were fed this morning, sir. They're well nourished." "Then why aren't they attacking?" No one had an answer. In the observation tower, the guests whispered among themselves, some taking photos, others just watching. Open-mouthed, the researcher was frantically taking notes in a notebook. In the enclosure, the scene that unfolded was of an almost mystical beauty. The horse had lain down, and the young jaguar had nestled beside it. The other two felines maintained a respectful but clearly relaxed distance. 40 years studying animal behavior," said the researcher, "and I've never seen anything like it." Jake, who was observing everything from outside the fence, felt an indescribable emotion take hold of his chest. It was as if he was witnessing a miracle. Not only was the horse alive, but it had found an unlikely family. "This has to have an explanation," said Victor, visibly annoyed. "Animals don't act against their instincts without reason." "Unless," said the researcher slowly, "they already knew each other." "What do you mean?" "Sometimes when young animals are raised together, they develop bonds that transcend the natural. Predator-prey relationships. It's rare, but it has been documented." Victor was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a barely disguised irritation. "Hank, tomorrow morning I want this horse removed from the enclosure. I'll think of another way to use this animal." "Yes, sir." "And I want a complete report on the jaguars' behavior over the last few months. Something isn't right." As the guests descended from the tower and prepared to leave, Jake remained observing the enclosure. The horse and the jaguars had settled down to sleep, forming an unlikely but harmonious group. "Did you see that, Jake?" Hank approached, still shaking his head in disbelief. "I saw, and I still don't believe it. 40 years working with animals, and I've never witnessed anything like it. It's as if they were family." "Maybe they are," said Jake thoughtfully. "In some way we don't understand yet." That night, Jake couldn't leave. He sat outside the enclosure, observing the four animals sleeping together. There was something deeply touching about that scene, something that touched the most sensitive fibers of his soul. For the first time since he had arrived at Blackwood Sanctuary, Jake felt he had found something worth protecting. He didn't know how, he didn't know when, but he knew he wouldn't let Victor separate that unlikely family. The horse, as if sensing his thoughts, opened its eyes and looked directly at him. In that gaze, Jake read a clear message: gratitude. The animal knew it had found not just shelter, but a protector. Morning brought bad news. Victor arrived at the sanctuary in an even worse mood than the previous day, accompanied by veterinarians and a truck that Jake recognized as being used for transporting large animals. "I want the horse sedated and removed in an hour," he ordered dryly. "The jaguars, too. They're going to separate enclosures until I decide what to do with them." "Sir," tried Hank, "they're so peaceful together. Maybe it would be better." "Are you questioning my orders, Hank?" "No, sir. Of course not." Jake was observing everything from a distance, feeling a revolt growing in his chest. In the enclosure, the horse and the 3 jaguars had spent the night together, and by morning they were showing even more surprising behavior. Young Maya followed the horse as if she were a cub following her mother, while the other 2 jaguars maintained a protective vigilance around the group. "Jake!" Victor's voice called him. "Come here." With his heart racing, the young man approached the boss. "How long have you been working with these animals?" 3 years, sir." "And have you ever seen anything like this before?" "No, sir. Never." Victor studied him with penetrating eyes. "You seem disturbed by the situation." "It's just that it's beautiful to see, sir. They seem like a family." "Family?" Victor let out a dry laugh. "They're animals, boy. They don't have human feelings." "With all due respect, sir, but I work with them every day. They do have personalities, preferences, bonds. Bonds that interfere with my plans." Victor turned his back on the enclosure. "Prepare to help with the separation." While the veterinarians prepared the sedative doses, Jake took advantage of a moment of distraction to approach the enclosure. The horse came to the fence immediately, as it always did when it saw him. "They're going to separate us," he whispered, touching the animal's muzzle. "But I'm going to find a way for you to stay together. I promise." The horse snorted softly and touched Jake's hand with its muzzle. The young jaguar, Maya, also approached, rubbing herself against the fence near where Jake was. It was then that Jake noticed something he hadn't seen before. On the jaguar's right ear there was a small mark, a scar in the shape of a cross, and on the horse's neck, almost hidden by its mane, a similar scar. "Interesting, isn't it?" The voice behind him made him jump with fright. It was Miss Martha, the sanctuary's cook, a lady of about 60 who had worked there longer than anyone. "You saw it too?" "Those marks?" "Of course I saw. They're identification marks for cubs." "Cubs?" Miss Martha looked around, making sure they weren't being overheard. "Come with me, boy. There are things you need to know." Jake followed her to the kitchen, a small but cozy place at the back of the property. Miss Martha served coffee and sat at the table, gesturing for him to do the same. "5 years ago, the Blackwood family had a special project," she began in a low voice. "They raised exotic animals on a private farm, not here at the sanctuary. It was the youngest son's hobby, Richard." "I've never heard of him." "Because he had an accident 3 years ago. He was left with sequelae, and the family doesn't like to talk about it." Miss Martha took a sip of coffee. "Richard loved animals. He had a special way with them. On that farm he raised some cubs together as if they were siblings." Jake felt his heart speed up. "The horse and the jaguar?" "Among others. The horse was the pride of the family, an expensive thoroughbred destined for competitions. The jaguar was an orphaned cub that Richard rescued. They were raised together for almost 2 years. And then the horse grew up and went to training. The jaguar was brought here, along with 2 others that were also on the farm. It was supposed to be Richard's experiment on interspecies bonds. That's why they didn't attack the horse. That's why they recognized him as family." Miss Martha sighed. "But after the accident, Victor took over all of his brother's projects, and he doesn't have the same sensitivity." "What happened to Richard?" "He's in a private clinic. They say he hasn't fully recovered." She lowered her voice even more. "But some people say he was trying to protect the animals when he had the accident. That there was an ugly argument between the brothers about the fate of the animals." Jake absorbed all this information, feeling the pieces of a puzzle fitting together. "Miss Martha, do you have a way to contact Richard?" "Why?" "Because maybe he can help protect the animals." The cook studied him for a long moment. "Are you thinking of confronting Victor?" "I'm thinking of doing what's right." "Doing what's right can cost you your job, boy. Your life, too. Some things are worth more than a job." Miss Martha smiled for the first time. Richard would say exactly the same thing. She got up and went to a drawer from which she took a paper with a phone number. "Call this number. Ask for Laura. She was Richard's friend and works with animal protection." "Thank you." "Jake." She held his arm as he was leaving. "Be careful. Victor is not a man to accept opposition." Back at the enclosure, Jake found the veterinarians preparing for sedation. The horse and the jaguars sensed the tension in the air and grouped together in the center of the enclosure, as if forming a defensive barrier. "Start with the jaguars," ordered Victor. "The horse last." Jake discreetly took his cell phone and filmed a few seconds of the scene, the horse and the jaguars together, clearly demonstrating the bond that united them. Then he quickly typed a message to the number that Miss Martha had given him. "Laura, we don't know each other, but I need your help. I'm Jake. I work at Blackwood Sanctuary. I have a horse and 3 jaguars that were raised together and are being separated against their will. Miss Martha said you might be able to help. Please call me." He sent the message along with the video and quickly put away his phone. At that moment, the veterinarians entered the enclosure with the blowpipes. The first dart hit Iris, the larger jaguar, who staggered and fell in a few seconds. The second hit Nora. When it came to Maya's turn, the young jaguar positioned herself between the horse and the veterinarians, as if trying to protect it. The horse, in turn, lowered its head and touched the feline's back, in a gesture of farewell. That broke Jake's heart. The phone vibrated, a message. I received your video. I'm on my way there. Hold out as long as you can. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue. The separation was brutal to watch. Even sedated, the jaguars showed resistance to being removed from the enclosure, and the horse became visibly agitated when it realized its companions were being taken away. It whinnied softly, a melancholy sound that echoed through the sanctuary like a lament. Jake helped with the transport, but each step was torture. Seeing that improvised family being dismembered by caprice went against all his principles. Victor observed everything from the tower, satisfied with the operation. Put the jaguars in the individual enclosures in the north sector, he ordered. The horse goes to the isolated pasture near the entrance. Why separate them so much, sir? Asked Hank. Because I don't want them to see or hear each other. I need to break this unnatural bond. 2 hours later, when the sedation began to wear off, the animals demonstrated behavior that impressed even the veterinarians. The horse positioned itself in the corner of the pasture closest to the jaguar sector and didn't leave. The jaguars, each in their individual enclosure, constantly turned in the direction of the pasture, emitting low calling sounds. This is disturbing, commented one of the veterinarians. I've never seen such strong bonds between different species. It's temporary, said Victor dryly. In a few days, they'll get used to the separation. But Jake knew it wouldn't be like that. During his lunch break, he visited each of the animals. The horse greeted him as always, but there was sadness in its eyes. The jaguars, especially Maya, seemed anxious and restless. I'll find a way, he whispered to each of them. Don't give up. In the late afternoon, when Jake was cleaning the enclosures, Hank approached with a worried expression. There's a woman at the gate asking for you, says she's a journalist and wants to do a story about the sanctuary. Jake's heart raced. Journalist? Yes. Her name is Laura Mitchell. Victor isn't here, so I said you could talk to her, but be careful what you say. Jake practically ran to the gate. The woman waiting for him was about 35, with curly hair tied back in a ponytail and intense green eyes. She wore practical clothes and carried a large shoulder bag. Jake, she extended her hand. I'm Laura Mitchell. I received your message. You got here fast. I was in Austin when I received your video. I cancelled all my appointments and came. Straight here. She looked around. Can we talk in private? Let's go to the canteen. At this hour, it's empty. They walked in silence to the small building where the employees had their meals. Laura sat at the back table and opened her bag, taking out a recorder. First of all, I want you to know that I'm a journalist specialized in animal rights. I worked with Richard Blackwood on several projects before his accident. You know Richard? Very well. He's one of the greatest animal defenders I've ever met. Her expression saddened. What happened to him was a tragedy. Miss Martha told me about the accident. It wasn't an accident, Jake. Laura leaned forward. Richard was trying to prevent Victor from selling several animals from the project to private collectors. There was a fight. Richard tried to take some animals to a legitimate sanctuary and ended up suffering what the family called an accident. Jake felt a chill down his spine. Are you implying that... I'm saying that Richard has been institutionalized for 3 years because he opposed his brother's methods, and that the animals you showed me in the video are the last survivors of that project. That's why Victor wants to separate them. Exactly. They're living evidence of what Richard managed to create. Genuine bonds between different species, based on love and care, not domination. Laura turned on the recorder. Tell me everything about what's been happening here. Jake reported the events of the last 2 days, from the arrival of the horse to the forced separation that morning. Laura took notes and occasionally asked for clarification. The video you sent me is extraordinary, she said when he finished, but I need more evidence, and I need to meet the animals personally. That's going to be complicated. Victor doesn't like strangers at the sanctuary. Leave that to me. I have experience dealing with people like your boss. Laura put away the recorder. Meanwhile, I want you to continue documenting everything. Film their behaviors, their reactions to the separation, anything that demonstrates the bond between them. And then Then we're going to expose the whole truth. The public needs to know that there are alternatives to the way we treat wild animals, that it's possible to create bonds based on mutual respect. At that moment, Hank appeared at the door of the canteen with a tense expression. "Jake, you need to come see this, quick." The three ran to the jaguar sector. There they found a scene that made Laura immediately grab her camera. Maya had managed to bend some of the bars of her enclosure, something that should be impossible for a jaguar of her size, and was trying to climb the fence to reach the pasture where the horse was. "My God," murmured Laura, filming everything. "The strength of the bond is overcoming the instincts of self-preservation." "She's going to hurt herself," said Jake, running to the enclosure. "Jake, no!" shouted Hank. "It's dangerous!" But the young caretaker had already opened the gate of the enclosure. Maya immediately stopped trying to climb and approached him, rubbing against his legs like a domestic cat. "She trusts you," observed Laura, still filming. "Jake, this is extraordinary. You've established a bond with her too." "I've been taking care of her for 3 years," said Jake, carefully caressing the jaguar's head. "She knows I'm not a threat." From the distant pasture came the horse's whinny. Maya immediately turned in the direction of the sound and responded with a low, prolonged call. "That's it," said Laura, putting away the camera. "I have enough material to start." "Start what?" "The biggest awareness campaign about interspecies bonds that this country has ever seen." Her eyes sparkled with determination. "I'm going to show the world that love knows no species boundaries." "And the animals?" "They're going to stay together, Jake, I promise, but it's going to require a lot of work and courage on our part." That night, Jake stayed at the sanctuary later than usual, visiting each of the separated animals. All showed signs of anxiety and melancholy. It was as if a family had been brutally separated. While observing the horse in the isolated pasture, Jake received a message from Laura. "Tomorrow we begin the fight. Have faith." For the first time since he had arrived at Blackwood Sanctuary, Jake felt there was hope, not just for the animals, but for himself. He had finally found a cause worth fighting for. Morning brought a surprise that would change everything. Jake arrived at work and found Hank with a panicked expression on his face, holding a tablet in his hands. "Jake, did you see this?" he asked, showing the screen. It was an online article with the title, "Love Has No Species, The Incredible Story of Bonds That Defy Nature." Laura's article had been published on one of the country's main news portals, accompanied by the videos that Jake had sent. "My God," murmured Jake, reading quickly. "She really did it." "Did what, boy? Do you have any idea what this means?" Before Jake could answer, the sound of screeching brakes echoed through the property. Victor had arrived, and by the speed with which he got out of the car, he was furious. "Hank! Jake, here now!" His shout echoed throughout the sanctuary. The two ran to the main office where they found Victor pacing back and forth like a caged animal. His face was red with anger, and he was holding his own tablet with enough force to break it. "Can either of you explain to me how images of my sanctuary ended up on the internet?" Jake swallowed hard, but before he could answer, Victor continued. 2 million views in 4 hours, 2 million, and everyone talking about how I mistreat my animals. "Mr. Victor," tried Hank, "perhaps we can clarify." "Clarify what? That I have traitorous employees working for me?" Victor stopped right in front of Jake. "It was you, wasn't it?" "Sir, Don't lie to me, boy. I recognize the angles of the filming. You were outside the enclosures." Jake took a deep breath. The moment of truth had arrived. "Yes, sir. It was me." "Why?" Victor's voice came out low, dangerous. "Because what was being done to the animals was wrong. They have a real bond, sir. They're a family." "A family?" Victor let out a humorless laugh. "They're animals, my property, and you had no right to expose my private property. With all due respect, sir, but animals aren't property. They're living beings with feelings." The discussion was interrupted by the ringing of the phone. Victor answered it abruptly. "Hello? What do you mean, Department of Environmental Protection?" His expression changed from anger to concern. "An inspection? Based on what complaint?" Jake felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Laura had kept her promise. "Tomorrow? No, that's impossible. I have—" Victor took a deep breath, forcing a more diplomatic tone. "Of course, we'll be available. Thank you." He hung up the phone and looked at the two employees with pure hatred. "Congratulations, Jake. Because of your betrayal, now I have federal inspectors coming to examine my property. Maybe it's an opportunity to show that you take good care of the animals," suggested Jake, trying to keep his voice steady. "Take good care?" Victor approached dangerously. "You want to know what taking good care is? It's giving animals exactly what they need to survive. Food, water, shelter. The rest is sentimentalism. And love, sir, companionship, social bonds? Nonsense. Human projections onto animals." At that moment, Miss Martha appeared at the door with an urgent expression. "Mr. Victor, more people are arriving. Journalists, it seems." "What journalists?" "They have cameras and everything. They say they want to see the famous animals." Victor cursed under his breath. "Hank, close all the gates. Nobody comes in here without my authorization." "Sir," said Jake, "if there's nothing to hide, why not let them see the animals?" "Because it's nobody's business what I do on my property." All morning, journalists and curious onlookers accumulated at the gates of the sanctuary. Jake could hear them from inside, some trying to film through the bars. The story had sparked national interest. Around noon, Laura managed to enter the sanctuary accompanied by a lawyer and a veterinarian specializing in animal behavior. "Mr. Blackwood," she said politely, "I'm Laura Mitchell, author of the article. I'd like to talk with you. I have nothing to say to sensationalist journalists." "Sensationalist?" Laura kept her calm. "I only documented facts, animals that developed interspecies bonds and are being forcibly separated. They're my animals. I do what I want with them." "Actually," said the lawyer, "American law is very clear about mistreatment and inadequate captivity of wild animals. There's no mistreatment here. Forcibly separating animals that have developed social bonds can be considered psychological cruelty," explained the veterinarian. "It's a form of emotional torture." Victor turned red again. "You have no authority to be here." "We do," said Laura, showing a court order. "Authorization to document the conditions of the animals until the arrival of the federal inspectors." Throughout the afternoon, the group toured the sanctuary documenting the conditions of the animals. The veterinarian made detailed notes about the stress behaviors observed in the horse and jaguars. "It's evident they're suffering from the separation," he said to Laura, while they filmed Maya trying once again to climb the bars of her enclosure. "The level of anxiety is extremely high." Jake accompanied the group, serving as a guide and explaining the behaviors he had observed. With each testimony, he felt more confident that he had made the right decision. "Jake," said Laura when they were alone for a moment, "you know you'll probably lose your job because of this." "I know. But some things are more important than—" "A job? Do you have others? Family that depends on you?" "No. I've been alone in the world since my parents passed away. Maybe that's why I identify so much with these animals. They also lost their original families." Laura looked at him with admiration. "You have courage, Jake. A lot of courage." In the late afternoon, when the group was preparing to leave, Victor appeared with 2 security guards. "The visit is over," he announced. "And you," he pointed, to Jake, "are fired. I want you off my property now." "Sir, please." "Now." Jake looked at the enclosures where his protégés were. The horse was watching him from the pasture, the jaguars from their individual enclosures. All seemed to understand that something important was happening. "Don't worry," he said softly, knowing that only the animals could hear him. "I won't abandon you." As he walked to the gate, he heard behind him the melancholy calls of the horse and the jaguars. It was as if they were saying goodbye, but also as if they trusted he would return. And Jake knew he would return. One way or another, he wouldn't leave that family separated. Jake's dismissal brought an unexpected turn. The next morning, when the federal inspectors arrived at Blackwood Sanctuary, they found a situation that no one had foreseen. The animals were refusing to eat. Laura received a call from Hank, who was desperate. "The horse hasn't touched food. For 2 days, the jaguars either. It's as if they're on a hunger strike." Animals don't go on hunger strikes, Hank. They're deeply depressed. The inspectors want to know if it's normal. Victor is saying it's because he changed their feed, but I've been working with animals for 40 years. I've never seen anything like it. Laura arrived at the sanctuary, accompanied by Jake and the behavioral veterinarian. This time they had legal authorization to remain on site throughout the inspection. The scene they found was heartbreaking. The horse was lying in the corner of the pasture, inert, looking fixedly in the direction of the jaguar sector. The three felines were in similar positions in their enclosures, all facing the pasture. "This is severe depression," diagnosed the veterinarian. "If they continue like this, they could enter a process of irreversible decline." "What does that mean?" asked the chief inspector. "That they could waste away to extreme weakness. In serious cases, animals in captivity can develop resignation syndrome." Jake approached Maya's enclosure. The young jaguar, seeing him, got up for the first time in 2 days and came to the fence. She rubbed against it, emitting low sounds that seemed more like laments. "She's calling." "For him," said Jake, with tears in his eyes. "They all are." "That's impossible," said Victor, who was observing everything with growing nervousness. "Animals don't have complex feelings like that." "With all due respect, Mr. Blackwood," said the veterinarian, "modern science proves exactly the opposite. Many species develop deep social bonds, especially when raised together from cubs." It was at this moment that an unknown car entered the sanctuary. From it descended a man of approximately 40, using crutches accompanied by a nurse. Jake immediately noticed the resemblance to Victor, the same eyes, the same facial structure. "Richard?" murmured Laura, running to meet the man. "Hi, Laura. I got here as soon as I could." Victor paled. "What are you doing here?" "I came to get my children," said Richard simply, looking toward the enclosures. "Your children?" "They're animals, Richard. You still haven't gotten over that fantasy." "Fantasy?" Richard smiled sadly. "Victor, I spent 2 years taking care of them. I saw Thunder born. I saw Maya take her first steps. I saw when they recognized each other, as family for the first time." "Thunder?" asked Jake. "The horse. That was the name I had given him." Richard approached the pasture, leaning on his crutches. "Thunder, my boy!" The effect was instantaneous and impressive. The horse raised its head, whinnying loudly, and got up, staggering but determined. It ran to the fence, touching its muzzle. To Richard's hands. "My God," whispered the inspector. "He recognized his father," completed Richard, with tears streaming down his face. "Didn't you, Thunder? You remember Daddy." From the jaguar sector came roars of recognition. The three felines were agitated, walking from side to side, clearly recognizing Richard's voice. "Maya, Iris, Nora!" Richard called, and the sounds that came in response made all those present shiver. "This is scientifically impossible," murmured Victor, but his voice no longer had the previous conviction. "It's not impossible," said Richard, turning to his brother. "It's love. It's bonding. It's family. Everything you always said didn't exist between different species." The veterinarian was making frantic notes. "I need to document this. This level of recognition after 3 years of separation is extraordinary." "Richard," said Laura softly, "tell them about the original project." Richard took a deep breath, leaning on the fence. 5 years ago, I was developing a rehabilitation program based on interspecies bonds. The idea was to prove that traumatized animals could heal through companionship and love, even if that companionship came from different species. Thunder had suffered abuse before he came to me. He was aggressive, distrustful. Maya was an orphaned cub rejected by her mother. Iris and Nora had been confiscated from a circus where they were mistreated. When I put them together, I thought it wouldn't work. But something magical happened. Thunder adopted Maya as if she were a daughter. Iris and Nora became protectors of the group. They healed each other. "And then?" asked the inspector. "Then my brother decided the project wasn't profitable. He wanted to sell the animals to private collectors. When I tried to stop him, there was a disagreement." disagreement that resulted in your accident, said Laura. It wasn't an accident, said Richard, looking directly at Victor. It was the price I paid for trying to protect my family. The silence that followed was heavy. All those present were absorbing the revelation that the animals weren't just animals. They were survivors of a project of love that had been brutally interrupted. Mr. Blackwood, said the Chief Inspector, in light of this information, I'm going to recommend that the animals be transferred to an appropriate sanctuary where they can stay together. One moment, said Richard. I have a better proposal. Everyone turned to him. For the last 3 years, even in the clinic, I continued working. I've developed a special sanctuary project focused on interspecies bonds. I have funding, licenses, a specialized team. He looked at Jake. And now I have a caretaker who truly understands what it means to love animals. Me? Asked Jake, surprised. You risked everything for them, Jake. That tells me everything about your character. Victor tried to protest, but his voice sounded weak. They're my legal property. Property acquired through coercion and kept in inadequate conditions, said Laura's lawyer, which can be legally questioned. Besides, said Richard, I'm willing to buy the animals from you, Victor, for the fair market price. For the first time since he had arrived, Victor seemed to consider the proposal. Are you serious? Completely. They go back to where they always belonged, with me, and you receive fair financial compensation. Jake felt his heart race with hope. And they'll stay together? Forever, promised Richard, as a family should. From the pasture and the enclosures came sounds that seemed like approval. It was as if the animals understood that they had finally found their way back home. There's one condition, said Richard, looking at Jake. I need someone who knows them, who understands their bonds, someone they trust. I accept, said Jake without hesitation. Anything for them. And at that moment, under the Texas sun, a family that had been separated by greed and human misunderstanding finally found its way back to love. 3 months later, Jake woke up as he always did these days, with the soft sound of animals communicating at dawn. But this time they weren't sounds of sadness or longing. They were sounds of contentment, of family reunited. Hope Valley Sanctuary, located in a preserved area 2 hours from Austin, had become much more than Richard had originally dreamed. With the international repercussion of the story of Thunder and his feline companions, donations arrived from all over the world, allowing the creation of a center of excellence in interspecies bonds. Jake walked through the main enclosure, observing the scene that still moved him every day. Thunder grazing peacefully while Maya slept leaning against his flank. Iris and Nora maintained a relaxed vigilance a few meters away, forming a protective circle around the unlikely pair. "Good morning, family," he said softly, as he did every morning. Thunder raised his head and came to meet him, followed by Maya, who had developed the habit of greeting Jake by rubbing against his legs like a giant cat. Iris and Nora approached too, allowing caresses that 3 months ago would have been unthinkable. "Jake!" Richard's voice echoed from the office. "Come here, there's a call for you." Jake ran to the small building that served as the administrative center of the sanctuary. Richard was on the phone with a huge smile on his face. "Yes, he's here. Jake, it's from the Discovery Channel. They want to make a documentary about our family." In the last few months, the story of Thunder, Maya, Iris, and Nora had attracted international attention. Scientists, journalists, students, and curious people came from various countries to witness what many considered impossible, a perfect harmony between predator and prey, based on deep emotional bonds. "They want to follow an entire day of the animal's routine," explained Richard, after hanging up. "And they want to interview you too. You've kind of become their ambassador." "Me? I'm just the caretaker." "You're much more than that, Jake. You're the link between them and the human world, the proof that it's possible to love without trying, to control." Laura appeared at the door at that moment, carrying a camera and smiles. "Good morning, guys. I came to do the follow-up article for the International magazine." "Another article?" asked Jake. "The last one had 12 million views online. The whole world is fascinated with our family. Laura went to the window from which the main enclosure could be seen. And look at that. In the enclosure, a new scene was unfolding. Thunder had lain down, and Maya was using his back as a pillow. Iris was licking the horse's mane, while Nora stood guard nearby. It was a scene of family intimacy that defied everything that was known about animal behavior. 3 months ago they were wasting away with sadness, observed Richard. Today they're healthier and happier than they've ever been. And Victor? Asked Jake. He used the money from the sale to invest in rural tourism. From what I know, he's much calmer and has even started treating the animals that remained in his sanctuary better. Richard smiled. Sometimes people just need a push to discover there's a better way. During the afternoon, while Laura conducted her interviews and did the filming, Jake reflected on how his life had completely changed. 3 months ago, he was just an employee following orders. Now, he was the special care coordinator of the sanctuary, responsible not only for Thunder and the jaguars, but for other similar cases that arrived regularly. Jake, said Laura during a break, have you ever stopped to think about what you've achieved? What do you mean? You saved a family, but more than that, you proved to the world that animals have complex feelings, that they form deep bonds, that they suffer with separations and heal through love. I didn't do any of that alone. But it was you who took the first step. It was you who had the courage to challenge the system. At that moment, a group of visitors arrived at the sanctuary. It was common to receive people interested in meeting the famous interspecies family. Among the visitors, Jake recognized an elderly woman accompanied by 2 children. Grandma, is it true that the horse and the jaguars are friends? Asked one of the children. We'll find out, my love, replied the lady. Jake approached the group. Good afternoon. I'm Jake, the animal's caretaker. Can I help you? My grandson doesn't believe a horse can be friends with jaguars, said the lady. We came all the way from Washington, D.C. just to see. Then you've come to the right place, smiled Jake. Come, I'll introduce you to the family. As they walked to the enclosure, Jake explained the story with the passion of someone who had lived through every moment of it. The children listened, fascinated, asking questions that revealed an intuitive understanding of what many adults found hard to accept. Look, whispered Jake when they reached the enclosure. Thunder was playing with Maya, running in circles while the young jaguar playfully chased him. Iris and Nora watched, occasionally joining in the game. It was a scene of pure joy and freedom. Wow, exclaimed the boy. They really are friends. They're more than friends, said Jake. They're family. And family is who loves us, even when we're different. The girl, quieter, approached the fence. Thunder noticed her presence and came to her, allowing her to touch his muzzle through the bars. He's very beautiful, she whispered. And very wise, added Jake. He taught me that love is stronger than fear, that compassion is more powerful than force. At the end of the day, when the visitors had left and the team had retired, Jake remained in the enclosure for his night round. It was his favorite moment, when he could talk alone with the animals that had changed his life. You know you've become famous all over the world, he said, sitting on the ground near the fence. People from all countries come here to meet you. Thunder approached and rested his head on the fence, allowing Jake to touch it. But to me, you were always special. From the first day, I knew there was something different about you. Maya came too, positioning herself beside Thunder. The other 2 jaguars approached, forming a semicircle. Thank you, whispered Jake, for teaching me that there are things in life worth more than safety, more than money, more than approval. You taught me about courage. At that moment, as if responding to his gratitude, the 4 animals emitted soft sounds, Thunder a low whinny, the jaguars deep purrs. It was like a symphony of mutual gratitude. Jake stood up, observing one last time the reunited family. Thunder and Maya were already settling down to sleep together, while Iris and Nora assumed positions that allowed them to watch over the territory during the night. Good night, family, he said softly. See you tomorrow. As he walked back to his house, a small building within the sanctuary itself, Jake reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him here. He had lost a job, but found a vocation. He had risked his security, but found his purpose, and most importantly, he had helped prove that true love knows no barriers of species, color, origin, or any other difference that the world insists on creating. In the starry Texas sky, the stars shone like silent approval of a story that had begun with separation and ended with reunion, that had begun with fear and ended with love, that had begun with despair and ended with hope. A story that proved that sometimes happy endings